Welcome to the Eric Brady podcast, Series 1, Adolf Hitler, His Bombers and Me, Episode 2, The Rise of Adolf Hitler. So Eric, for the benefit of our younger listeners in particular, can you tell us who Adolf Hitler was and how he became the dictator of Germany?
Yeah, it was actually quite extraordinary because before World War I, he was a penniless street artist in Vienna, pretty much living as a vagabond and living in homeless shelters. And then when World War I broke out, somehow he managed to join the German army, which was a bit of a surprise because actually he was an Austrian, but he got into the German army and really had a pretty successful career there. He was in the Messenger Corps, which was a pretty dangerous job at that time, and he won the Iron Cross, both the second class and the first class. So even though he remained just a corporal, not promoted beyond that, he was nevertheless recognised as a brave soldier. And then after the war, after the armistice, the Treaty of Versailles was signed in July 1919. And to the Germans' fury, it was more stringent on them than the 14-point armistice agreement. So they felt not only resentment against the military of having surrendered and against the emperor, but also against the Allies and this Versailles Treaty. And though it was very stringent on the Germans, in fact, fairly quickly, in successive ways, the German government managed to water it down more and more and more, but it was still intensely resented. Then Hitler joined, on direction of the very small army that was left, the German Workers' Party. There were several small parties at the time, all of them with the main focus of being anti-Versailles Treaty. But what Hitler did was to take over this fledgling party and transform it into the Nazi Party, which gained political power and in fact in 1932 became the strongest party in the Reichstag.
The Nazis being the National Socialist German Workers' Party and the Reichstag, the German Parliament.
Correct. Also that year, von Hindenburg, the president, because the Nazi Party was the strongest in Parliament, suggested and made him Chancellor of Germany, which focused power in Hitler's hands. And then in 1933, he got the Reichstag to pass the Enabling Act, which was supposed to last just for 4 years, but which in fact made him dictator. And once he was in power, he fulfilled his election promises of massive rearmament of Germany in all branches, Army, Navy and Air Force, and also began a programme of public works. Part of this was the building of the Autobahns right across Germany towards the border of France. While that, of course, was mighty useful for the commercial development of Germany, it also provided rapid routes for his armies to sweep forward towards the west when he was ready.
So when you were born in 1933, Hitler's power was already entrenched?
Yes. So not only was he popular with the people of Germany, he was also popular with the industrialists who were making vast fortunes out of this.
How was he viewed from outside of Germany?
As the German rearmament continued and increased, the Allies were getting more and more worried. At various times they could have stopped Hitler, but they didn't, and so they were now presented with a fait accompli. During the time before Hitler came to power, the German forces and generals that were still in existence had begun training a lot of pilots. They even did some of their training on Russian or Soviet airfields as well, with the help of Russian Soviet instructors. So when the time came that Hitler increased the planes of the Luftwaffe, he also had the pilots ready to man them. As I said, the Western powers were now getting more worried. And then the Spanish Civil War broke out, and Franco was a right-wing dictator wanting to gain power and was in sympathy with Hitler, though Spain never joined in the war on the German side. They remained neutral. But what happened was that the new Luftwaffe formed the Condor Legion out of their bomber pilots, and they went into Spain in support of Franco, and they targeted Guernica, this Basque city, pretty small, but it had a big population, not just of native people there, native to the Guernica itself, but there had been a big influx of refugees from the fighting further south. Also, it was a market day when people from all the surrounding villages and hills and hamlets would pile into Guernica for selling their goods and also buying. And so when the bombers came over, there were many people there. They bombed the centre of Guernica. Factories were on the outside, but it was the civilian targets that they hit. And there were no air defences in the way of anti-aircraft guns. There were no fighter defences. The city was completely open to being destroyed, as the centre was.
When did Hitler bomb Guernica in support of Franco?
26th of April 1937.
The Allies didn't get involved, did they?
Not officially. There were very many volunteers that went out from the UK as well as elsewhere, and they fought on both sides. There were volunteers on both sides.
Was the Spanish Civil War over by the time Hitler started invading other countries?
Yes.
After the Spanish Civil War, what was next on Hitler's agenda?
To actually invade Western countries on a piecemeal basis. Started small, but then increased until actually the Second World War broke out.
In the next episode, Eric will tell us about Hitler's plans for German expansion. Buy Eric's book, Adolf Hitler, His Bombers and Me, to read alongside the series. Available via ericbradybooks.co.uk. Eric's trilogy follows the Jackson family through the Second World War, the Berlin Airlift, and the Cold War. The Eric Brady podcast can be found on YouTube, podcast services, and at ericbrady.blogspot.com.